And good afternoon, everyone. This is Jason Horejs, owner of Xanadu Gallery. I'd like to welcome you to our podcast. Today is Tuesday, July 31st, 2012. And I'm your host, Jason Horejs, as I mentioned, and I am here today with my co-host and broadcaster, Barney Davey. Barney, welcome. I think I've got you there, Barney.
Hi, Jason.
Hey,
How are you
good
doing
afternoon.
today?
Great. How are
Hi.
you?
I'm great. Glad to be here as always. Looking forward to this today.
Looking forward to it, and it looks like we have a lot of interest amongst registrants as well. This is one of our best registered broadcasts, so apparently we're all very interested in self-promotion. As always, I'd like to begin the broadcast just briefly going over some of the logistics of the broadcast. I'm just going to touch on them briefly here. The most important thing here is that this is an interactive broadcast. You'll be able to ask questions of Barney and myself during the course of the broadcast. You can do that in two ways. On the right-hand side of your screen, you have a control box. You'll see it has various options for you. One of those boxes says questions. Anything that you type into the question box, I'll be able to see and we can respond to in the broadcast. And then also at the end of the broadcast, we'll do a question and answer period. During that question and answer period, you can ask questions audibly if you have a microphone attached to your computer. And you can do that by clicking on the yellow hand icon. In essence, that raises your hand, lets me know that you have a question, and we'll attempt to bring you in audibly. I will mention that sometimes we run into technical difficulties there, so if we can't get you in audibly, I apologize, but we'll have you type the question in. I'll also mention that we are recording this broadcast, and so there will be a recording available usually within a couple of days of the broadcast on both of our websites and xanadugallery.com. And with that, Barney, let's dive right into the topic. I thought it would be helpful if we could just briefly look at an outline of our conversation today, and I'm not going to read through that, but those in attendance can look at it to get a sense of what we're going to be talking about. But let's begin this conversation by maybe defining a little bit what self-promotion is. And as with many discussions, I'm going to defer a lot to Barney in this conversation. Although we do a lot of self-promotion, Barney put together this outline and has some great input on it. So, Barney, in your mind, what is the definition of self-promotion?
Well, let's face it. As an artist, you're an entrepreneur. Whether you're, and this goes for any small business, but I think it particularly applies to being an artist, you have to find a way to get people to be aware of what you're doing. So at its basic level, that's what self-promotion is. It's using the available tools that you have to your advantage to get more people aware of what you do. If they know your name and they know your art, they're far more likely to buy your art and to refer other people to buy your art. So just being aware of that and then being aware of the tools that are available for you to use is really what self-promotion is about. It's some people mix it up with being a bragger, somebody who's boastful. It has nothing to do with that whatsoever. You can be a meek, humble person and still do self-promotion. You can't be so shy that you're afraid to talk to people, but you don't have to be a puffed up bragger that just turns most people off. So just being aware of what the tools are and how to use them, and then consistently applying them is what self-promotion is and how you make it work for you to be more successful in your career.
And in my conversations with artists, I think this is probably a very difficult concept for many of them to understand. I hear it all the time, artists telling me, I hate to talk about myself. I hate to talk about my work. I feel like I am bragging or I'm just not sure what the balance is. And so I know, again, from experience that this is a real concern amongst artists, how to promote themselves without coming across in that overly braggerly way.
There's a difference between bragging and having and being proud of what you do. If you make a piece of art and stand back. And I know I was this way when I was a fine woodworker. I don't do it anymore. I live in Arizona where the temperatures just, I don't have a basement, and working in a 100-degree or hotter garage just doesn't appeal to me. And as I've gotten older, needed the dust. But when in the days when I was making a piece of furniture, there would come a time when I was done or near done, alone in my workshop, and I'd stand back and look at that and know that came out of my creativity. I made that with my hands, and I would feel this immense pride about what I did. It just filled me up with something that drove me to want to do more of it. And I know artists have that same feeling. If you can find a way to exude that kind of feeling, to show that you're proud of what you do, not that you're boastful, but that you're proud of what you do, then that is how you talk to people about what you do. And it comes across as confidence, not braggadocio. Confidence is sexy. You don't have to be the best looking person. If you go into a room of people and look at who's getting the attention, you'll find that the people who exude the confidence, the most self-confidence, often are the center of attention. And it's not because they're standing there bragging and talking louder than anyone else. It's because they have some kind of almost magnetic quality about them. So that's kind of on a high level, but you can do the same thing. If you're proud of your work, you should be proud to talk to other people about it. You may need to practice about it. It's some of us haven't had public speaking experience, so you need to practice. Practice in front of a mirror, practice while you're painting, practice what you would say to people when you want to talk about your art. And so you get comfortable with a little bit of patter so that you say things in the same way. And you smile when you're saying it. Make yourself happy. You're proud of this. Share that with other people. Not sharing what you do, but how you do it and how you feel about it. You can do that without bragging. I guarantee it.
And what is the, I've seen this question come across in a lot of the emails, what's the difference between self-promotion and marketing and advertising and public relations? These are all tools that kind of interact with one another at different levels, and I think sometimes there's some confusion about self-promotion versus marketing or advertising.
It's self-promotion is it doesn't have a sharply defined edge to it to say this is and this isn't. So to some extent, all of these things kind of go together. But marketing, advertising, particularly advertising and public relations, those are things that are third-party systems that you put in place to try to drive awareness for yourself. So in some ways it is gaining self-promotion to let people know about you, but it's working through a third-party system. I think of self-promotion being more along the lines of something that you are personally involved in, so that your stamp is on it, that you're actively participating in it. You can have an advertising program or a public relations program, and somebody else is managing it, and you really have very little to do with it. Whereas self-promotion, you have a greater degree of interaction with the things that you're doing.
Okay, excellent. And let's talk a little bit then about some of the skill sets that an artist would need to have in order to successfully promote themselves.
Okay. Well,
and we've touched on a little bit of them already.
Yeah, I mentioned public speaking. And I know the idea of public speaking is one of the things that people fear the most. And I have personally seen in my career people who've gone from being deathly afraid of public speaking to actually being quite good at it because they overcame their fear with it. It is purely just a fear. You can, through practice, get to learn to be comfortable talking in front of a group of people. One of the best ways to do it is consider joining a Toastmasters group. They take in any type of person and help you refine your skills, learn what your strengths are, and be able to present yourself so that you can talk comfortably and naturally to whether it's just a small group of 3 or 4 people or a large group of several hundred people. Another way to do it is maybe start off offering to talk in front of, if you have children or grandchildren, come to their school and talk to children. Most people have an easier time going in front of a group of children than they would possibly a group of adults. However you do it, if you are willing to try, you can overcome it. I've often suggested this to artists as an idea for how to become good at public speaking, and that's take a subject that you're interested in. Maybe it's the history of the art in your local area, or maybe it's a famous artist in your local area, or could it be Renoir, or a certain art movement, something that you're willing to dig into and get a lot of information, become sort of a quasi-expert on it, to the point where you can put together a short 30-minute, maybe up to an hour talk that you're willing to go give to a Rotary group or a Kiwanis or your Chamber of Commerce. Most of these places are looking for people who are willing to speak. And you're not going to be as good when you start, but if you're willing to get out there and start, you can become adept at public speaking to the point where you can add it to your skill sets and make yourself more presentable and increase your self-promotion in ways you couldn't otherwise. So if you're talking about your local, a famous local artist, you're not really talking about yourself, but the halo effect of that is that people are going to become interested in you. What do you do? Can I see your art? What kind of art do you make? How can I help? How can you help me with the art that you're making?
And speaking from kind of the gallery side of things, where I have an opportunity on a day-to-day basis of interacting with customers, I feel like my experience in public speaking has been incredibly beneficial there. And I also will second what you've said in that speaking publicly is certainly a learned skill. As a child, I was a very introverted, terrified of public speaking, in a lot of the same ways that I might have been terrified of learning how to ride a bicycle or any other skill that I didn't know. And having the opportunity to begin public speaking, I feel really has been the most valuable tool that I have in my tool chest in terms of being able to sell artwork. And I speak now not only to customers in the gallery and sometimes to groups of customers, but also in terms of speaking to groups of artists. Just a very valuable skill to have.
If anyone has had the opportunity to be at one of your live workshops, they would be surprised to know that you ever had any issues with speaking, because you do it naturally. It comes out of you fluidly. You're having fun with it. You're well versed in your topic, and that's what I was talking about, doing the research. And
absolutely, yeah. And I, as I am interacting with some of the artists, for example, if I'm about to have a gallery opening or a show for an artist, in preparation for the show, we'll often sit down together, even at a very early stage of preparation, talking about, kind of the theme for the show and the inspiration for some of the pieces. And what I found is that by helping the artist work through some of those kinds of questions ahead of time, when it comes time to interact with the potential customer at the show, they've already thought about it. They have something interesting to say about the artwork and about themselves and about their inspiration, and that has been very valuable in going into a show. So any artist can do that if you're getting ready for a weekend show. Sit down and even consider writing out some of the material that you'd like to share with your potential buyers, be it your background or the background on the artwork.
Great suggestion. Anticipate what are the most likely questions to come up, and then it's going to come out slightly different every time, but if you have a kind of some talking points on what you know you're going to answer with, the more you do that, and again, you got time in the studio, you have time to practice this, it's well worth doing. I don't know how many of you are aware of this or not, but when a guest goes on the Jay Leno show or the David Letterman show or just about any of these interview shows, they sit down in advance with people from the team and they go over, well, what have you been doing lately? You've been on vacation, got any kids? Tell me about this, tell me about that. They just pepper them with a lot of questions until they answer with something that, oh, that's interesting. And so they look for what the guest might be willing to open up a little bit about. So it's the same thing. These people may look like they're just sitting there casually talking to Jay. Jay knows the questions, they know the answer. It may come out slightly different, but it's so much easier for them to know to go in advance. I know what I'm going to talk about. I'm not going to be throwing a curveball here. And even if you do this and you get a curveball, you can be like a politician. Answer the question as briefly as possible and then turn it to what you want to talk about.
Now, I also think that this kind of preparation then translates into what you're going to be doing in terms of, what the copy on your website is going to say, your blogging. Having kind of a base of preparation is going to translate into all of your other promotional and marketing and advertising avenues as well.
And that's a great point too. That speaks to somewhat of branding, where you have a consistent message. Whether you're talking to people in person or through a blog post or on a piece on your website or in a postcard or a sell sheet, that there are certain things that look the same, that come out the same way. And as you work on that, you'll refine and find that this comment resonates more with others. You and I were surprised, Jason, that the art of self-promotion was as popular as it is with the turnout that we had. So we didn't know that in advance, and I mean, it's great news for us. We can work on that and build on it and maybe do more along this lines if there's continued interest in it. You'll get the same kind of feedback as an artist, that people, I can see people's eyes light up, or they ask me more in-depth questions about that. Well, that's your key, that you need to know, I want to focus more on that. So it's a little bit of branding. Like I said before, self-promotion kind of crosses the line with branding and advertising and marketing. It kind of all mixes together, but it's really about you and what you do as a person.
And what kind of opportunities should an artist be looking for in terms of self-promotion? You're not going to be promoting yourself much if you're locked in your studio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
They're around you everywhere. There's a book out, I think it was written by an insurance salesperson, which is not surprising, but it's called Never Eat Lunch with the Same Person, I think was the title. And the concept there applies to anybody who wants to raise the bushel basket off their light and get more awareness for themselves, and that is that opportunity is around you all the time. Whether you see it or not is up to you. You have to become more aware of it. Let me tell you a quick story. I went for close to 20 years to every art expo in New York, which is the premier big international gala show at the Jacob Javits Center, with some of the top artists and art publishing companies from the world all convening in New York, in Manhattan. And at its zenith in the late 90s, maybe early 2000s, there was a post-show party put on at Maxime's, a swanky restaurant, kind of discotheque place, by an artist of the name of Michel Delacroix, who is a Frenchman who paints these kind of French naive sort of paintings. And it was Robin Leach from The Rich and Famous person was there, and Ivana Trump was there. They were going to unveil Michel Delacroix's latest original, which was selling for $40,000 and sold that night. And so there was a band, there was an open bar, there was a buffet. It was without a doubt the most swank art affair I'd ever been to. And I'd happened to meet a couple of years before an artist who was a sculptor. I met her in Southern California and got in touch with her when I was in New York just to say hi, and then she came along with a group of us from Decor magazine that I was working for to go to this show, this after-party show at Maxime's. And I would say she arguably was the most successful artist with the greatest degree of ambition. Her ambition is to get into MoMA. She wants to be in the Museum of Modern Art. In fact, she wouldn't even exhibit at Art Expo because she thought it might in some way ding her career a little bit to be in there with high-end reproductions, Jacques and so forth. She was also the only artist that I know that was in there that had in her purse a cell sheet. It was like a 4x6 postcard of her work. She wasn't going to a party. Yeah, went to a party, having a drink and meeting people. She was there to network, to meet people. What do you do? She didn't whip out that postcard on everybody she met. She wasn't going to waste the time and effort and bore somebody who there was no connection there. But she quickly, and without being in any way obnoxious about it, would ask some questions of people, just informational questions. What do you do? You know, why are you here? Whatever. Get the people someone talking. If it was someone who remotely had the opportunity to possibly affect her career positively, they had her card. If it was somebody, say, a publicist or a media person, possibly even a gallery or an artist rep, she'd get their card and call them afterwards or send them a personal note and say, it was great to meet you. Maybe we could get together sometime and have coffee or whatever. It was amazing to me. Here's an artist that had, you know, maybe the most talented artist in this place, who could have possibly just gone there and had a good time and did nothing, which is what most everybody else was doing. They've been working all day. She was in there working the room and did it in such a classy, understated way. Nobody had any idea what she was doing. I just watched her in awe and said, she will go far just because she's determined to be successful, and she works at it wherever there is an opportunity. She makes those opportunities. Nobody else, most of the other artists that were there didn't even realize it was an opportunity and weren't prepared for it even if they had realized that they weren't prepared for it. So they're all around you. Whether you need to be thinking in advance, where am I going? Am I going to be exposed to people? Is there going to be some opportunity for me to do something? And then be prepared. Have something to give people. Which brings me to a point, and I will say this: ditch your business cards. They're useless. They're 20th century appendages that are nothing more than a way for people to blow you off. You give them the business card, you've assuaged their guilt for, yeah, I'll get back to you. And it's not going to happen. It just doesn't work. You give them, if there's an opportunity for you to possibly connect with somebody, give them something that has a call to action on it. If they're really important, do like Carol. Give them something with a call to action and say, can I contact you? Take it to the next step and you be in control of it. It works. It's just being aware of opportunities and then acting on the opportunity.
And I'm sure that many artists, including many who are in the audience today, would say, oh, you know, I'm just afraid that I am going to be that annoying, pesky, irritating artist. And my response to that is, if you're concerned about it, you're probably not going to be, because you know, just naturally, just being yourself, you're not going to go overboard. And even more than that, in my interactions with artists, I feel like an artist, as Barney has said, being confident and believing in their work doesn't come across as annoying at all. It comes across as interesting. Put yourself in you know, the other person's shoes. They're interested in art. They're interested in you, and the more confident you can be, and the more valuable information you can give them about yourself and your art, the happier they're going to be. They're not going to get irritated or annoyed at you.
You can also use your intuitive knowledge. We all have this. When you're talking to somebody, you can see, are they engaged with you? Are they looking at you? Are they looking around? If they're looking at you and listening to what you have to say, and they're open to it, then proceed. If they're looking the other way, if they're jittery, they're not making eye contact with you, cut short and move on. there's plenty of other opportunities. Don't annoy somebody who isn't giving you the proper feedback. If they're standing in your space and paying attention to you, you can work with it. If they're not, move on. That's where the people who are clueless are the ones who get dinged for being a bragger or just a shameless self-promoter, who are just pitching without any awareness of the circumstances, whether they're getting feedback. If you're in that one-on-one and the feeling is good, you got a good rapport going on, work on it. Take advantage of it. If you at any point you feel like it's not working, you can back off. There's plenty of other people in the room for you to move on to the next person.
And so, that gives us some good conversation, some good ideas on a kind of a one-to-one level in terms of self-promotion. Now, what about taking it kind of the next level and talking a little bit about publicity?
Okay. Just to make a distinction between publicity and press releases, press releases are sort of, you're pushing an idea out. I have a gallery opening. I just got announced. I just won an award. Here's something newsworthy about me. I want to get it into the media. Nothing wrong with that. Do it all. Do as much of it as you can. Publicity, on the other hand, is getting interest from a media person, whether it's a blogger, somebody with a television personality, a radio personality, a journalist in a local newspaper or local magazine or regional magazine. Those are all great prospects for publicity. And with publicity, what you're looking for is somebody who will write a story about you. There's nothing greater than publicity, in my opinion, because it gives you implied third-party endorsement. This person's the real deal. Advertising and press releases will get you out there, but it's obvious they're coming from you. Publicity, on the other hand, is coming from Phoenix Home and Garden magazine, which, by the way, does do pieces on local artists. How do those artists happen? Well, sometimes they're recommended by galleries. Sometimes the writer is looking for a certain look and has an artist. Many times it's because the artist or the representative for the artist has developed a relationship with that media person, so that when an opportunity that fits with what they might be doing on their media schedule, their editorial schedule, I'm going to be writing about florals or abstract florals or pet portraits or whatever it is. If they have somebody already in their Rolodex that they know, that's going to be somebody they're much more likely to go to, especially if that person has been around them, developed some kind of relationship with them, maybe suggested stories to them for other artists or events, and in some ways tried to be helpful to them. That goes above and beyond. It's kind of to give, and it works with media people. If you understand, if you're bent on getting into Phoenix Home and Garden magazine, what you want to do is go online, look up their advertising schedule, and their media kit, which almost always will contain their editorial schedule. So you can see that in December they're going to cover this topic, and that's of interest to you. So then you can start laying the groundwork on how you could possibly submit something for potential consideration to have that media person contact you to include you in that story.
And I'll mention here, just speaking in terms of working with magazines, we do an awful lot of magazine advertising, and of course, every publication will tell you that there is a, kind of a firewall between the advertising team, the sales team, and the editorial team. In other words, they don't want, and for good reason, and I understand this completely, you wouldn't want the readers of your publication to think that your editorial is all driven by your advertising. But at the same time, we've found that it's been very useful for us when we're advertising with a publication to ask for an introduction to the editorial team, and of course the sales team is going to be very happy to make that introduction. And if we can then provide useful information to the editorial team, you can bet that they're going to be more likely to think of us than they would be to think of someone who doesn't have a relationship with the publication. So, I would definitely encourage you, if you are ever spending money on advertising, to also be aware of what's going on the editorial side of that publication.
Getting your foot in the door, however you do it, is worthwhile, and certainly advertising people want to keep you happy, so they will at least do what you said, make the introduction for you. They may not be able to run a lot of, depending on how strong that firewall is, they may not be able to run a lot of interference for you, but they can at least get your awareness level raised up much higher than you might be able to do on your own. I encourage artists who are interested in publicity, and I encourage you to be interested in publicity because it's free and valuable and important, to look around you, starting locally and maybe regionally, to figure out what are the media outlets in your local area. You'd be amazed if you start looking how many weekly magazines, monthly and weekly newspapers, monthly magazines, and other types of, maybe even business related, that aren't necessarily right aware, on your top level of awareness. If you build a database, start with everything that you can think of. Don't qualify anything, just get it onto a database, and then you can maybe go online and look and see what they're doing and put a level of importance. I would really want to work on this one. I don't care so much about that one. You'll sift through and find that there are a number of places where you could potentially get publicity in one of those media vehicles, and then start looking at them. What kind of stories are they doing? And then you think, how could I do a story that's similar? What do I have a storyline that would sort of fit with the genre of what they're doing? And also keep an eye on who's doing that. If you see that there's a byline for somebody who's written an article, Google them. You can stalk them a little bit. Go on Facebook. Find out a little bit more about them. Become friends with them. Like I mentioned, you can send them ideas for articles. You can offer to be an expert on something, especially like if I talked about if you became a local expert on your local art scene or whatever it is. If you need any information on this, I've got a wealth of information on Picasso in the Cubist period or whatever it is. Just let them know. Eventually you'll have a tidy little database of people that know you and and I'm stalking, I know it's kind of a strong word, but I would find out where are these people going to be publicly. If you can find somebody that you think really has the chance to write something that is going to help you, there's nothing wrong with showing up. If they're going to be at a charity event, show up at that charity event. Introduce yourself. And again, you're not going to be self-aggrandizing and bragging and blah, blah, blah. Hi, I've been following you. You might mention, you might know, I sent you an idea for this. I love your work. That latest piece you did was fantastic. I'd like to stay in touch with you. By the way, I'm interested in possibly sending some ideas to you for some things that I'm doing. Could you tell me what are your timelines? How do you like to get material submitted to you? Do you like could I write an article for you? Would you like an outline? What are your deadlines? Take the time to get to know what their needs are and then try to fill it. On the other hand, and I think I've said this on another podcast, but I'll tell it quickly. I was in the misguided insurance business career for a little while before I came to my senses and realized it wasn't for me. But in the meantime, I was promoting a little CD that we gave away from Farmers Insurance that protected kids. You could take a snapshot of all their different ages, so in case of an Amber Alert, you had a right on a computer that you could upload to the Amber Alert organization a recent photograph, the height and weight of the child. And this was all kept on a CD that reminded you, get the late, it's been 6 months, get a new picture of your kid and this thing. So I sent press releases to 15 outlets here in the Phoenix area. Within a week or less, I got a call from a producer at the ABC affiliate here to say, we'd like to interview you. Can you be here in 2 weeks on Wednesday? So within less than 3 weeks, I was sitting on a local morning news, kind of entertainment news program, talking about me being a farmer's insurance agent and this CD that would protect your children. So it can happen that quickly if you're prepared for it and you've got an idea. Just keep in mind all these media outlets, as you begin to build a database, need to feed the beast. They have to. They're constantly looking for content. So if you got a unique storyline, especially if there's something local about it, maybe something charitable about it, you got a far greater chance of advancing that story to get it into the press one way or another.
And from publicity, let's move to the press release then. What is a press release? How can one be used effectively? Talk a little bit about the benefits of a press release.
Okay. A press release is a prepared document, usually 300 to 500 words, although they tend to be a little bit longer now because of the internet, that you write up. That's a story that's announcing that something's happening in your career. Maybe it is a gallery opening. Maybe it is that you've gotten a local award. Maybe it is that you've reached a career milestone. On my website, I have or on my blog, Art Print Issues, I've written some press release type of blog post about maybe a half a dozen of them. I'll include it in the resources, Jason, for us so that artists can go there on ideas that you could use to write press releases about yourself. So what you do with that is you can write it yourself, or if you're not comfortable with getting it down into the best possible English, you can submit it off to a company like Gramley, GRAMLEE.com. Again, we've mentioned this one before. I love them. Very inexpensive. They will take your written words and then under 24 hours polish it into something that you're proud to send off as a press release. And you can use sites like prweb.com or prlog.org. There's dozens of them. These are places where you can submit a free press release. You submit it, tell them what day you want it to go out on, and it will be published and be available on Google. It'll be keyword. Some people can search for it in keywords. If it's of interest and a journalist is looking for a story on something that's related to some of the keywords in your press release, it's possible that a journalist will actually just run your press release as filler for their whatever media they're doing, or might even call you and say, that's interesting, I'd like more, can you send me some other information, or I possibly want to interview you for a story. But this is a very affordable way to get, again, third-party. It's not as strong as publicity, but it does give you third-party implied endorsement for what you're doing, and it also creates links back to your website or your blog, which is very helpful for search engine optimization. If you're doing throughout the year, if you're doing things of importance, whether you're having a holiday sale, or you are having that grand opening, or you're going to be appearing at some trade show or pardon me, juried show, or whatever the case might be, you can send out a press release. It's free to do, easy to do. There are plenty of, you can just do a Google search for how to write a press release, and come up with tons of great articles. Tara Reed, Tarareed, is somebody who's written extensively on licensing. She's got a great little ebook on how to write a press release, and it's more slanted for artists. So you could just do a Google search for Tara Reed press releases and come up with that ebook, which also has a bunch of great resources in it as well.
I think it's also, kind of just talking about both publicity and press releases, to think a little bit as well about who it is that you're trying to get to. Who is, that end audience that I'm trying to reach? Who is it that's going to be most interested in what I have to sell? And kind of work your way backward from there. Okay, what publications are they reading? What TV shows are they watching? What local TV shows or radio shows are they, following? And then what kind of content would be of interest to them and would get to them? And you can kind of also look at just as you've mentioned, Barney, looking at what other people are doing to get to them and craft something that is very similar. And we've had some real success in the gallery in terms of promoting shows by doing exactly that. And, sometimes we end up going through outlets that we might not have initially imagined. I had one artist whose work tended to appeal to kind of the engineering type, civil engineers and that kind of thing. And by knowing that, by having observed a lot of her buyers were those kind of buyers, it pushed us to promote her shows in some publications that we might not have otherwise done. So, sometimes thinking a little bit outside the box and just being very observant and thoughtful about the world around you and your customers that you're trying to reach can be very helpful as well.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's another good use of a press release. I talked about releasing it through a press release organization like PRWeb or PRlog.org, but you can also submit them directly to like an engineering publication that or the Arizona Republic or Phoenix Home and Garden Journal or whatever you have on your target list of I want them, I want that organization, and particularly if you have a name of somebody, I want a specific person to be receiving this press release. In that case, you do your best to find out the name of the person and write them a personal note that you're not just spamming them with a press release, but you're sending them, maybe even mailing it to them, making the contact more personal. But you can take a press release, nothing wrong with that at all, and directing it right to somebody so that you do. That's the rifle approach opposed to the shotgun approach. I want this person to. I'm doing my very best to make sure that this person or this media organization is aware of this press release. One other thing that goes along with press releases. Sorry, Jason, do you want to jump in there?
Oh no, you're fine.
Okay. Having worked for magazines for many, many years, I was always astounded by how few of our artists or advertisers took advantage of the publicity columns that we had. We'd have monthly features on different, here's new releases or just different kinds of features that would be repeated every month, and those were submitted. This was just stuff that we were going to put in the magazine every month. Somebody was going to get some mention in that magazine. Those things aren't worth a whole lot of effort, in my opinion, because I don't think in most cases they generate a great deal of response. But if you're throwing it into the mix, into all of these other things that you're doing, and you're already creating a press release and you're looking, I keep picking on Phoenix Home and Garden, but what the heck, I'm sure in there they have some monthly sections where they just do a brief, here's something, and here's the contact, and here's how much it costs, and that's it. And if you become aware of what those publicity columns are and get that on your schedule, you can knock something like that out, and once you get the hang of it, you can submit something like that in 15 or 20 minutes of your time. Here's the JPEG, here's the description, here's the contact information. Send it off and you're done. It's just another way to make another impression. Jason, I know you've talked about it a lot, and so have I, that you need 7 to 10 touches to convert somebody into a buyer. You know, people don't come in your gallery and just buy stuff the first time you see them. I'm sure you have to work that.
Sure. Some of them do, but you know, by and large, it takes a lot more effort than that. And I remember several years ago, we were going to be having a show for one of our artists, and we kind of pulled out all the stops and put out all the promotions, did some advertising, sent out press releases, got the show on all of the local newspaper calendars and the magazine calendars, and several days before the show even opened, we had a couple come into the gallery, and they walked right over to one of the walls and one of the paintings on the wall, and they said, "We feel like we just have to buy this piece because everywhere we turned, we would see it. We saw an advertisement for it in 2 different magazines. We read a little blurb about it in the Arizona Republic about the artist, and it just seemed like we couldn't get away from it." And I think it's interesting how sometimes you can almost feel like you know, that's happening, and we've all experienced this where, you know, maybe in our normal daily life, we drive around on the streets and we never notice, you know, a particular model of car, and then for some reason a friend of ours buys one, and all of a sudden everywhere we look we see it, and you know, there's just something that happens to us when something like that occurs, when we're made aware of something that is very powerful, and you know, that's been a very important tool for us in marketing our artists and our shows.
Breaking through that wall of just people have their filters up, but if you can find that crack and get the message streaming in, this kind of thing happens for you. And it won't happen unless you work at it. You have to keep finding new ways to putting out similar messages so that you build that familiarity about your work, so people begin to feel almost like they know you, or you know, like those people. I bet in some way they felt like they knew that work and never even had set foot in the gallery because you laid the groundwork for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is an expansive and vast topic, and probably each individual aspect of it we could talk about for hours, but we're quickly running out of time. I want to make sure that we have some time to get to some questions, and so let's do that. And again, there are 2 ways to ask questions. Some of you have already been typing questions into the question box, so we'll start with those. But if you'd like to ask a question audibly, go ahead and click on the yellow hand icon. I went ahead and put everybody's hand down since I wasn't sure if you still had a question, but if you have a question and want to come in audibly, click on that yellow hand icon. Let's start. Boy, and we've got just a ton of great questions. And I don't have a name on this one. Last name is Fritz, but he says, or she, could be he or she says, I respectfully disagree that self-promotion, PR, advertising are separate in terms of who is doing the marketing. In today's digital world, the artist has the wonderful opportunity to be all those to use all of those tactical tools. And I think actually we would agree that you kind of have more direct access and can be more in control of your publicity and marketing than you've ever been able to in the past.
I wouldn't disagree with that either. I think I was making the distinction about those artists who've built an organization to the point where maybe somebody else is handling their advertising or publicity, and the artist is not as involved in some aspects of it. But
yeah, and I think it's a question of channels that are available to you that you can use.
Yeah.
You have control directly of some of those channels, and some of the channels are owned by other people, and you're using their channels to broadcast your message.
I'll say this, the more the artist is involved, the more likely they're going to get the result that they're looking for. Unless you've built up that, if you're a well-known artist who has actually built a small business and has a number of people working for you, then you're going to be more insular from certain things. Let's hope everybody listening here today gets to that point.
And Catherine asked the question, what online self-promotional services do you suggest artists use? And you've talked about a couple of them, Barney, but I just wanted to bring that question up because we'll make a list available of the tools that we've used, and anyone who has tools that they use for promotion, we'd love to have you post those to the blog of the recording when it becomes available. But do you have any other specific tools you want to mention right now, Barney?
Well, I mentioned prweb.com and prlog.org. Those are places where you can put up a free press release, or if you want to spend $80, you can get higher distribution. I don't think it's worth it in most cases. Artists are, for the most part, careful with their budgets. But there are other places that you can get things out. FineArtAmerica.com is a place that sells reproductions. You can upload up to a 20 megabyte image, and they'll reproduce it and have it shipped out for you and collect the money and then pay you. But they also have a feature on there where you can do announce events. So I would start looking at where else what other places online that I go, or that I think that people that might be interested in my art go, where I could list events. That could be on Facebook. Or it could be if you're doing pet portraits. Does the Arizona Humane Society or some shelter group have a place where you can list an event? Even Craigslist is a possibility. It's how open do you want to make your mind to it?
Now, Jim Justice asks the question or says, I'm launching a new website / shop for selling prints and related items. I'm thinking of hiring and finding a professional firm to help me optimize my marketing approaches. Any advice or suggestions? I'm not an expert at marketing, but intend to be successful, and this is a key ingredient.
I am a believer in search engine optimization. I want to have every keyword that I'm interested in as ranking as high as possible. I would be very cautious about who I hired when if you're going down that road, Jim, because there are a lot of people out there who are anointed search engine optimization experts. There isn't a school for it. You can't get an MBA in it.
Not yet, anyway.
Not yet. It's probably coming. And there are some people who are really good at it, but I would be careful about who you hire and what they're going to charge you, and I would definitely be doing research on who else have you worked for, and I want to contact them, and how long have those people been with you, and are they happy with the results? I would look at all those things and then realize people are going to buy more from people they're familiar with, that they like, and I think buying from strangers online on a website that nobody knows is it's a top. I wouldn't hang my hat on that. I wouldn't try to become successful on that. I would say that would be a secondary goal to the more primary goal of networking and getting to know people through interaction personally at events, public speaking, going online, joining LinkedIn groups or Facebook groups where you can have an interaction with people and get them to know you. Those kind of relationships are going to be greater than spending a lot of money having a search firm drive stranger traffic to your site. I'm not at all opposed to it. I just wouldn't place as high importance on it as some other things that I think can give you better results and probably for spending less money.
Excellent. Let's try and bring in a question now, a live question, and I'm going to go, or try to go anyway, to Laura Hill. Laura, are you there and did you have a question? Nope, and I can, nope, apparently I've lost Laura. Let's try one more. Andrea Levin. Andrea, are you there and did you have a question? Well, I am not having a lot of luck, unfortunately. And as we mentioned, sometimes the tech gods don't smile on us with the microphones being connected properly. So let's try. I'm going to try Catherine Manzo. Catherine, are you there? And did you have a question?
Yes.
Catherine, I've got you. Excellent. And where are you from, Catherine?
I'm a New Yorker who's transplanted to Memphis, Tennessee.
Memphis. So, excellent.
Got a quick question for you. I'm at a real turning point from the standpoint of marketing. I'm watching the Daily Painters, and I think to keep my technique at its highest, I often do those quicker studies. I do demonstrations when I teach all the time. Yet I'm a contemporary realist, and I will spend a chunk of time on a very finished piece as well. My concern is promoting properly to keep my price point up. If I were to attempt to sell the sketches, I have to certainly garner enough income from the long-term pieces, and I don't want one to sort of undermine the other in the same way that you discussed earlier, Barney the gal who didn't want to do prints because she was concerned it wouldn't get her into MoMA or prevent her from getting into MoMA. So is there a particular way one should promote if you're going to do that? You know, there's a few people out there who go by square inch, and that would floor me if somebody went by square inch, because you know, I'll have an 8x8 that's a little jewel that I've spent a chunk of time on, and then I'll have an 8x8 that I did in 3 hours. So any advice along those lines would be great.
Yeah, I can. I'll speak a little bit, maybe to the. Well, I guess both of those questions. There are several questions there, but no, that's okay. That's and it's a good question, and I think that in terms of pricing, that could be a whole other discussion. I will mention that a lot of my artists do price by the square inch, but that tends to happen when they are very consistent in the amount of time and detail that goes into the work. If that doesn't work for you, then coming up with another formula may be the way to go. In terms of promoting those kind of pieces, though, I've worked with several artists who have been able to parlay that kind of activity, the rapidly done pieces, into a great opportunity to create kind of a following for their work and a dialogue with some of their collectors that's just very easy. You know, it's easy for a buyer to buy an 8x10, and you know, it's a good excuse for you to be sending out frequent emails saying, I've just completed another piece, thought you might like seeing it, and it's kind of a way to introduce them further to your work, and you know, sometimes down the road they may be interested in the larger piece when it becomes available, and you now have an opportunity to be in touch with them to let them know about that kind of work. Your comments, Barney?
Well, I appreciate that some art takes longer than others, and it's the same size. And I don't know that I think that's really hard to differentiate with a buyer. I only spent an hour on this one, and I spent 3 hours on that one, so I have to charge you twice as much. It doesn't resonate with a buyer. They're going to look at it, and unless they can see a dramatic difference in the quality, they're not going to understand the backstory behind it to the point where they're going to think, why am I paying so much more for a relative same size? And I'm with Jason. One of my art heroes was a fellow named Richard Thompson, who died in 1991, and he was an American impressionist that painted over 1,500 paintings in his lifetime. His masterpiece sold for nearly $200,000 after his death, but he charged by the square inch. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I wouldn't be horrified at that idea. How you get to the pricing is one thing. Being consistent with your pricing so that people can understand and wrap their heads around there's a value range on your work, and probably unless there's a wide divergence between the look of them, it's going to be hard to charge more for work that you spend a lot more time on. Unfortunate, but it's sort of like you can't paint, you can't do portraits and do abstract realism and try to sell them both to the same gallery under the same name or to the same kind of collectors. They won't get it.
Well, and we could open a whole can of worms around those topics. So we're not going to do that because we are quickly running out of time this afternoon. But this has been a really interesting topic, and I know, again, that is something that is of great interest to artists. Barney, I think as we close, we should maybe just speak to the fact that we understand that as an artist, you each have to wear a lot of different hats, and it's very easy to become overwhelmed by all of the juggling that you have to do. So Barney, if you could suggest that to keep things manageable, one thing that an artist could focus on doing, say in the coming weeks or months, one thing that will help them become better at self-promotion, what would that one thing be? And I'm putting you on the spot here because I didn't make you aware that I was going to ask you that question.
Right, you didn't know.
So here's your curveball.
Okay. Calendar your activities. Prioritize them and calendar them. And then make, I know I'm giving you more than one thing, but have a time set aside where you're going to work on it and know what you're going to work on and have it on your calendar so that you actually do it. Stephen Covey, bless his soul, just died recently. Another one of my heroes wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, who was famous for saying, keep the main thing the main thing. When it comes to marketing, do the same. Keep the main thing, work on the things that are going to give you the greatest return, make sure they're on your calendar, and make sure that you do them. Don't worry about the rest of it. You'll find time sooner or later.
Excellent advice. And I want to thank everyone for attending the broadcast this afternoon. As always, it's a pleasure to share the time with you. Thank you, Barney, for your insights into self-promotion.
It's my pleasure. I'm sorry the hour ran out. I felt like we just got started.
Well, we did, and of course we'll continue the conversation. As many of you know, this is an ongoing broadcast. We do want to mention we had a podcast a couple months ago on blogging, and also very well attended and very popular. We've recently put together a package that includes the recording of the broadcast in both video and MP3 format, so you can either watch it on your computer or tablet or listen to it, listen to the broadcast on your mobile device. It also has a transcript of the podcast and an 18-part basically learning video on how to put together a WordPress site. And I just wanted to mention that we've done that because I'll be sending out, along with the recording of this podcast, the link to learn more about that learning package. It's kind of something new that we've put together because there was so much interest in that topic of blogging, and of course, kind of another angle of the whole promotion and marketing that every artist ought to be aware of and working on. So keep an eye out for that, and keep an eye out for future podcasts. We'll be letting you know about them as they come along. Again, thank you, Barney. It was a pleasure spending the afternoon with you.
Likewise, Jason. You might mention, since we're doing self-promotion, I'm going to be doing a couple of 4-hour workshops on on art marketing, how to get your work seen and sold. Next month, webinars, and you can watch your email for more information about that.
Absolutely.
Coming up later part of August.
Terrific, and we'll be in touch with all of you. Thank you so much for attending this afternoon.
It's a pleasure. Peace out.